Welcome to the Bank Marketing Show, the podcast that engages and informs you for success in today's marketplace. It's the show that will make you a better marketer with trends, tactics, and inspiration from experts and industry leaders. If you're wanting to impact your personal success and position your bank as the best choice in your market, you're in the right place. Now let's dive into today's show with your hosts, Chris and Dan.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Bank Marketing Show. We're certainly glad to have you with us as always. We continue to be amazed with how the show is continuing to grow in followers and interactions with you guys. So we certainly appreciate you and are excited about the show that we've got today. It's going to be a little bit of an unusual one because my co-host today is actually caught up in transit in conference season, and that's where we are. And so he couldn't be with us or didn't want to be on with a glitchy connection, that type of thing. So Chris, the other thing we realize is like nobody that's not named Chris is going to be on the show today. How about that? So, yeah. So we're missing out on my co-host Dan Novalis, and hope his conference-related travel is safe. But Chris Moya, great to have you with us today.
Chris, thanks for having me here. So the pleasure's all mine.
Absolutely. So let me kind of introduce you to our audience here. So. And Chris and I and our organizations have worked together a good bit over the years. And speaking of conference travel, I'll be coming out to New Mexico to the conference with you guys later this summer. Very much looking forward to that as well. So, but for those that may not know Chris, he serves as the president and CEO of the Independent Community Bankers Association of New Mexico, ICBA New Mexico. And you assumed that role from your predecessor, Jerry. You assumed that role in January of 22. So a little more than a couple of years now, right?
Correct. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah.
And actually came on with the association at the very end of 2020. So.
Okay. Nothing much was going on in 2020.
No, it was a quiet year.
Yeah, everybody was just kind of hanging out. So, and Chris, prior to that, you were the director of the New Mexico Financial Institutions division, and had several roles there, building into the director position, and then backing up even prior to that, had an extensive career in the mortgage industry in Southern California. So you've been in and around this animal for quite a number of years, Chris.
Yeah. So in different shapes, different forms, different hats, but definitely building up to where I'm at now. So
there you go. Well, great. Well, thank you for taking the time out to join us today. Really appreciate that. And yeah, I'll kind of tee it up with that. Chris, tell us a little bit more about your journey, kind of how you got into the banking industry and, getting involved with and then connecting with ICBA New Mexico.
Yeah. So, I like you stated before, my career prior to becoming a regulator was actually in the mortgage lending space out in Southern California. So residential lending all up and down the Southern California coast, inland. And then 2008 to 2010 happened. So, we all know the financial crisis kind of shook up both the banking sector, a lot of the financial industry sector, and especially with the implementation of Dodd-Frank and everything that happened there. I got kind of to the point, well, if I can't beat them, I might as well join them. So me and my family actually moved back from California here to New Mexico. That's where I'm originally from. I was born and raised out in eastern New Mexico. And me and my wife at the time decided we'd come out here and raise the family back where it was a little more quieter, calmer, and where we can enjoy and raise our kids the way we were raised. So came back here to New Mexico and actually got into the regulatory space. Started with the New Mexico Financial Institutions Division and actually developed the regulatory platform for the mortgage industry here. So like I stated, can't beat them, you might as well join them. So did that for about 10 years, wore a regulatory hat. And before I decided it was time for a change, stepped away for a while and started getting involved with the Independent Community Bankers Association late 2020. Jerry Walker, former president, was making a transition out, and so stepped in and started learning the tricks of the trade of the association, and brought my perspectives to the association then. And so been sitting here at the as president and CEO for the last couple of years. So
love it. Well, great. Yeah. It's interesting, isn't it, Chris? How we hear folks that end up really in banking in general a lot of the time, but certainly in the banking association sector that you're in, didn't plan to do that in junior high and had looked forward to it all your life, but transitioned and ended up there. So
absolutely. My career path has been laid out in a way that prior to I couldn't see myself in those roles, especially in the regulatory space and now in the association space. But it's definitely a calling. And I do enjoy having that regulatory background here in this role here with the association, because I tend to see things through a different lens sometimes, and it helps develop a perspective or an idea or a path. So.
Great. Well, so I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I think that lens and that perspective is what's really going to be valuable, and we'll kind of tug on your brain a bit about for our listeners today. So we're looking forward to that. Well, so Chris, the last couple of years have been really interesting in our industry with high rate environment and how things have changed to kind of post COVID, and we got past major supply chain issues and all these other kind of things. And boy, we all kind of rolled in that low interest rate environment for so long, and how much has changed over the last couple of years. So a little more present day, and things are shifting more frequently, it seems. And so, what kind of current day is a snapshot that you see with kind of where we are in the industry, and then maybe even a little bit looking forward from that, Chris?
Yeah, so, it's an interesting perspective. For the last 12, 13 plus years, we were in this environment of low rates, almost obscene rates, right? And so the customer behavior changed drastically. And there's a whole generation of folks that came out of school, were working, were getting involved in building businesses, and that's all they knew were zero rate, 0 to 3%, 0 to 4%. And so as those things started to tick up in the last 18 months, it was almost a shock to the system. And so I think now in the present day, it's been 18 months. So the price elasticity of demand and how that shock is affecting folks in business, it's starting to change a bit. And I think that's what has to happen as the system kind of plays itself out. A change in consumer behaviors, a change in buying behaviors and perspectives has to happen. Will we ever get back to where it was 24 months ago? I don't think so. I think a lot of folks sit back and think, well, it'll get back to where it was. Economies change and they evolve, but that's what has to happen now, and that's how I see now in the next 18 months going, as people start to internalize where rates are and what their buying power is, their buying potential, and how they set up their long-term business outlets.
Well, and you mentioned specifically that customer perspectives and thus behaviors, certainly have changed. I couldn't agree with you more. So I think that's a lot of what we're having to get used to, is it's not just about everything's low interest rates, so we're all about our competitors and, who can, do the most 2.7% mortgages or HELOCs or whatever. And it's not that anymore. So as those have changed, it's starting to think about marketing here, Chris, and to talk about that for a moment. As an agency, we're starting to see more value in cross-sell and all of these different things. And I won't answer it for you, but what are you kind of seeing and thinking as new marketing focus areas and kind of trends and activities? To speak to the point that you're about customers.
Yeah, so I think now from a marketing standpoint, now more than ever is really just stressing the value added that a community bank can bring, and talking really about community. Community is part of the name, right? And so stressing from a marketing standpoint or perspective, what it means to keep your dollars local. If you have a deposit with the community bank, what does that mean exactly? It means keeping those deposits in the community and redeploying them out. It's not necessarily the value or the interest rate or the cost of that money, but what economic drivers will be with holding those deposits at a community bank. It's also about relationship, going back to that relationship-based model of community banking and what that means, and not looking just at the cost of what a deposit's paying or what the interest rate is on a certain loan, but knowing that you have a relationship with a lender or a community banker that you can go to, you can turn to and ask those questions and develop a business plan and develop a business model that helps grow the community and helps grow the economy.
You know, Chris, we had a guest on a few months ago that Brett was kind of a pro on the generational perspectives. And what was really interesting is kind of going from the generation you and I are in and into millennials and then even into Gen Z is one of the interesting facts put out there about the Gen Z generation was a lot about that relationship and family and familiarity is more important than it was on kind of the generation in between. And as that rolled into the bank marketing discussion and comments that you were just making, I do think that relationship stuff is hopefully we're cycling back to that having a great deal more value, and maybe more of that than it used to. And it's not just a race to the bottom with who's got the absolute best rates, and it's not necessarily a price war anymore. So I think there's tremendous opportunity in that. You make a great point.
Correct. And I think kind of to build on that too is with the use of technology and the partnering with fintechs or community banks, they can continue to build on those legacy relationships. So as those generational levels move on, as kids grow up and go to college and move away, there are services, there's fintech partnerships, there's technology that community banks can harness to continue those relationships. So if they move another state away, they can still maintain their account in that community bank, something they grew up with. When they're ready to start their business, they already have that relationship that they've developed. It's not like it was 20, 30 years ago. Whenever you moved away, you had to move your bank, right? You had to move your accounts. You had to have somebody local where you could walk in and deposit that check. Now you can do it on your phone using technology and maintain that relationship and stretch that far out into the future. So we pass it on to your kids as well. So.
Man, that's a great point, and huge marketing sell points. And Chris, we've been fortunate, like yourself, to have CEOs of several of the state banking associations on over our 3 years of the podcast here. And we talk about some of the benefits of the state banking associations for their members, and the obvious ones that we know: networking and communication and all those kind of things. But I love what you just brought up, which is partnerships, which is banks finding these partnerships, with fintechs and techs, and I'll throw marketing, partners and agencies on that pile as well. So do you see, more of that in the modernization of community banks is through a lot of those partnerships and kind of fleshing that out through the associations?
Absolutely. And I think that's kind of something that we pride ourselves in, and something that I look to grow here in our association here at ICBA of New Mexico is finding those good partners that I can bring in and put them in front of our members to show them, here's some value added services that they provide. And as I go off and I have my travels around the country and I participate with other associations and do things at trade shows, I'm engaged at trying to start those relationships, see what types of value that they have that we can put in front of our members that they can deploy and bring value to their customers. And I see that as a big part of what our associations do, not only here in New Mexico, but across the other states. where there are independent associations with the overall goal to promote and help maintain the community banking model.
Yeah, Chris, I started this agency in 2009, again, which financially, obviously, and for FIs in general was a very interesting time period. But so much of that has evolved over the years. I see the current mindset and generation of community bank leaders becoming more open to those partnerships, and the realization that instead of hiring 2 or 3 or 4 new IT folks to develop a new technology, you go find the right partner to implement that and integrate that into your platforms and offer that to your current customer base or your community. And the same applies obviously for marketing and, so many different facets of what community banks are able to do. Therefore, their brand becomes so much more valuable and extensive and expansive to their community. And they didn't have to ramp up a bunch of HR and hire a bunch of people and manage all of that. They bring in the right partners and plug it into their offerings and systems. So,
correct. I mean, it's the community banking space. The biggest threat we have right now is cybersecurity and issues like that, and it becomes an economies of scale problem. And so, especially from a marketing standpoint, instead of creating all of these new IT technologies that are proprietary, we can go out and find these partners that are out there building that on a scale that's scalable to a small institution, mid-sized institution, and a large institution, and it's efficient.
Yeah. Well, so Chris, I did want to bring this up a month or so back. You guys brought me in and provided a webinar to, ended up being a great crowd with some of your membership, and we talked about brand voice specifically and what that means. And I think the conversation we're having here about the value that your community and your customers and hopefully new prospects, are having is so much around that. And it's not having a stale brand, but having one that is attractive, so that as you as a community bank are getting better at putting your people out there for the relationships, as you mentioned, which we all know is probably the greatest value that community banks offer over the big nationals, and regional banks for sure. And, so in doing that, do you think also that you see a little bit more of willingness on the parts of community banks, not necessarily to completely rename themselves and rebrand and go drastic. So, some have done that and need to do that. But there's so many other ways to refresh a brand and to do things that are of value. So do you see kind of an increasing willingness or if it's not willingness, a realization that, man, we've got to do that, on behalf of bankers?
Yeah, no, I think there's been a movement towards that, and even some conversations I've had recently about identifying and knowing who a community bank is and trying not to be something they're not. I think a lot of times there's that shiny new car, that shiny new thing out there, and folks, not just in community banking and business in general, think they have to be that. That may not necessarily who they have to be. What's made them successful, especially over the long term, is who they are, and coming back around and identifying who they are and understanding what they provide, and maybe figuring out a different way to tell that story or emphasize that story, or put some new paint on the garage. Sometimes does a lot for brand appeal, for curb appeal, and especially now with the increasing rate environment, you really have to change and come back and tell who you are and what you are, and how you deliver that, and what makes you important, what's made you important all this time, and what made you a cornerstone in your community. I think is important. So from a marketing standpoint, not necessarily changing who you are, but definitely how you change, maybe changing how you tell that story.
There you go. You said that perfectly, I think. It's not changing who you are. It's being who you are unapologetically,
right.
And then how do we put that story out there, that message, that brand message, and do that in a better way.
Yeah.
Particularly because Chris, we work with about 65 banks, okay, community banks and financial institutions. So we're out there a pretty good bit. Every single one of them want younger audiences. Every single one of them want to appeal to new ones and say that, hey, over the next 10 to 15 years, our average age customer is going to age out, and be gone. And so we need to be doing more of that. So I love the way you said that, is don't change who you are, be that, but identify it and market it better. That was well said. Yeah. Well, so, Chris, we're not a call-in show, but because Dan couldn't be with us today, he texted me a couple of things before our episode here, and he goes, man, I was really looking forward to asking Chris a couple of questions. Pitch these out there for me. So these are, I have to qualify this from my co-host who isn't with us today. But one of those is AI is around this, and AI is not a future tense thing anymore. And if anyone is going to a state banking association or one of the national organizations or a core or whoever it is, conferences, and getting out there and networking at this, during 2024 is probably the biggest topic of discussion. But you also have a regulator, background as well, Chris. So Dan's question for you, which I think was a great one, is kind of what are you thinking around AI and all of that, even from a regulatory perspective? What are you kind of seeing and feeling?
It's so funny how fast AI blew up in 2023, right? And it feels like just in January of last year, it's been around for a long time, but it's really like in January 2023, it kind of started to creep onto the scene, and people started to put their toe in the water, if you will. And within months, it was just everywhere, right? And now it's built into Microsoft Office products. It's built into everything that we use. But initially, it's just like everything new, scary, right? And so the regulatory hat comes on. What's the security issues here? How can this thing be infiltrated from the bad actors? What does it open up our institutions to in the use? But I think if you take a step back and you look at it from the 30,000 foot view, it's another tool. It's another tool in the toolbox that can provide efficiencies. And so I think, we use it here in our office quite a bit, just in the efficiency standpoint of developing ideas, developing things that we put out from a marketing standpoint. And it's all around. But I think still to this day, and I caution everybody, it's really about the security and what types of policies do you have in place. And there's that regulator in me. Okay, what are the policies you have in place? How are you going to monitor this? How are you going to manage this? How are you going to make sure that it's being used properly and not in a way that is detrimental to your institution? So, that's the straight 100% goofy, put your regulator hat on, comes around to policies and procedures, right? And how do you protect yourself and how do you protect your customers?
Well, and, it's one thing to have policies on paper and have that for when your regulators come in. It's another thing to internally function that, and from frontline staff to board and everybody in between, in a banking environment is both, Chris, I think the policy, as you say, which is spot on, but also the education of that internally. What does it mean that, for now our mobile app does this function that is actually an AI function, and what does this mean for, like you say, even the utilization by our team of Microsoft Office and all these other kind of things that we're doing now, because it's not coming, it's here. It's part of how we function, and everything that we touch with a keyboard these days, in order for text to be competitive, they're staying on the cutting edge of the utilization of AI. So to kind of sit back and wait on it and be scared of it, or not be trying to proactively move ahead of it now is probably short-sighted. Wouldn't you agree?
I would totally agree. I mean, it's everywhere and in everything. And so unless you jump in the car and drive it around a little bit, you're not going to know how to run it. And so, it's there. I look at it as a tool, like I stated earlier, a tool in the toolbox. It's a tool that can make you more efficient, and not this. I don't see it as something that takes the job of somebody else, but it's something that you can use to improve efficiencies with your labor force, and you may be able to take that person and put them in another role within an institution or within a business or within a company. It's there. It's the same way word processing changed or replaced the typewriter. It didn't really replace the person putting in the information. It just made you a little more efficient in how you did it and improved on your overall product. So
there you go. There you go. AI is not an eliminator, it's an evolver. If we within the industry utilize it right and embrace it, and I think that's a great example, Chris, is to morph, certain roles and those types of things. So but it's still got to have drivers behind it.
Correct. Yeah. Correct. Yeah. Absolutely.
Okay. Well, so the other question that Dan wanted me to be sure to put forward was one that he and I have in common too, and that's kind of flipping this a little bit and looking forward, Chris, and kind of putting your crystal ball on, whether that's for the remainder of 2024 or even out beyond. What's your outlook for the banking environment? Kind of where do you see us kind of moving and evolving, there that word is again, into both kind of short term and maybe a little bit longer term?
That's a great question. And it's always that crystal ball question. If I knew the answers, I'd be pretty rich, right? That's how the old saying goes with the crystal ball. We are in an election cycle this year, a national election cycle. So I think that tends to change the perspective a bit. The outlook could be a lot different come November of 2024 than we sit right now. Interest rates tend to seem like they are kind of stagnated and we're not seeing any big jump ups as the economy starts to change. One of the biggest concerns I have right now in my role here at the ICBA of New Mexico, and it's a concern for all of our banks across the spectrum, is really the regulatory changes. And we always talk about regulatory changes, and it's always a threat to the industry just because of the cost and the change and the requirements that come onto the banking system. But now with kind of some of the changes that the CFPB is talking about implementing and the impact that'll have on our industry and how we evolve to conform to those regulations, that's always a concern, especially from community banking, which tend to be smaller on the scale. Those regulatory changes have a cost, and that cost is always something that has to be taken into perspective when managing an institution, and how you implement those changes, how you implement those costs, and how you offset those costs. So that's always a concern, especially now going into the latter half of 2024 with a lot of the regulatory outlooks of CFPB. So,
well, it is, and it's probably again one of those things that we can allow it to ourselves to kind of be reactive to it, or again being part of state banking associations and all of the opportunities that all of that networking and co-working and all of that brings in, both with vendor folks, other community bankers, et cetera, is maybe to have a little bit of that forward thinking about the regulatory environments and what's going to be happening and all that, and give us opportunities to be proactive about it.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Great points there, Chris. Well, super. Well, there's so much happening in our industry. Again, it's not a flat, unmoving object. We could go on all day, but man, this is great. Just kind of looking back, across our conversation at kind of where things are, where you see them, the how we promote value and brand and all those kind of things. So really appreciate your insights on those.
Thank you, Chris. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And Chris, I can't let you get away because we love to do our lightning round with guests as well. So if you can stick around for just a moment, I've got a couple of lightning round questions for you that'll be fun.
I've got the time, so
love it. All right, so what can you share with us, Chris, that's a personal best and a business best?
So personal best, as far as the personal best practice, is that what we're going with there?
And B, sure.
Okay, so well, I think the personal best. There's something, there's always a statement that can be both a business best and a personal best. Something that stuck with me from a former mentor. But don't sling slop to meet a deadline. And I laughed because I was watching a documentary last night, and they were talking about John Wooden, and it's always don't be late, but don't rush. And it's kind of along those same lines, right? So don't rush to meet a deadline. Always make sure you put your best into it, but make sure you do your best to meet that deadline. So along those senses. So
there you
something
go.
I kind of always keep in the back of my mind and share with other folks. So
Great thoughts there. So Chris, can you share with us a favorite book or other resource?
Yeah, no, I think anything by Malcolm Gladwell, Outliers, The Tipping Point, all those, kind of always stick out. You probably got it on the bookshelf.
I think I've got it on the bookshelf here, yeah.
yeah, that's funny. Yeah, no, anything by Malcolm Gladwell. I love just the perspective, the insights, the vision, and kind of the overall application of many of the things he writes about. So
great. Keeps us moving and evolving. There you go.
Absolutely.
Love it. So what comes to mind for you as the most impactful piece of advice you've received?
It's funny. The golden paperclip rule. That's something that sticks with me, and I share it with folks. And when I started my career, I was working as an assistant with somebody and putting together a package for them for a presentation they had to do, and threw it together the way they wanted it stacked, and was helping them get ready for it. And they came in and started changing things around, taking off the silver paper clip and pulled out these gold paper clips and put gold paper clips on everything. And told me, when you put these presentations together, these packages for me, I want you to use gold paper clips. And I laughed at it and kind of scoffed it off as just, okay, whatever. And so later on down the line, I actually went to a presentation with this person. People were commenting on the gold paper clip. And it was really my opportunity to take a step back and realize that even the smallest minute details matter to people. And I've always carried that on, and you can transfer it over to anything above even just a gold paper clip. But it was that small minute detail where it starts. And don't overlook that, because if you overlook that, you're kind of on shaky ground going forward. So always a gold paper clip, gold paper clip, gold paper clip are all the minor details. Did I not skip over those?
I love that. And the way you put that, it's easy to remember too. I can hold on to that visual.
Yep, absolutely. The gold paper clip. And I've carried that on, I've passed it on, and I've told that story, and people laugh at it. But then whenever you kind of take a step back and look at it, and you realize it did matter. It mattered to those people. It mattered to whoever he was presented to, that he took the time to make sure that the paper clip was gold. And kind of a mentor of mine in business. And I've carried that with me throughout.
That's great stuff. So turning the corner on that, Chris, and by the way, I've worked with your team. There's ICBA of New Mexico, and you've got such a great team and some awesome folks there. So I'll throw that in as a side comment. But that leads to the next lightning round question, which is something you always tell your staff or your members. What's some advice that you pass along?
It's really here at ICBA New Mexico. We're the voice of community banking here in New Mexico. We're the advocates, and so it's really making sure that we are putting the best foot forward to represent our members, and not only representing them here locally, but at the national level. But really understanding and replicating that voice of who they are as well. They're community bankers. They're the cornerstone of their community. So just like the golden paperclip, right? That's that detail that we have to carry forward with what we do in our messaging and how we put our best foot forward for the preservation of community banks here in New Mexico. So really identifying, understanding that relationship-based model that our community banks abide by. We have to do the same.
Great stuff. Well, super, Chris. Well, so We'll put whatever you provide us with in the show notes for the episode today. But how can folks get in touch with you if they want to kind of network a little bit or bounce some ideas back and forth about some of the things we've discussed today?
Absolutely. You can email me. It's probably the best way to get a hold of me. It's attached at my hip, so through my phone. But Chris.Moya at ICBA.nm.org is probably the best way to reach me. And we could set some time up to chat and go that way. So
great. All right, Chris. Well, thanks so much, man. We will include that in the show notes today. And can't thank you enough for the time to be with us. Really appreciate you and look forward to the future and working with you guys.
Absolutely, Chris. And thanks for the opportunity here to spend some time chatting with you and throwing out ideas. So we appreciate you and appreciate your partnership with us as well. So
absolutely. Great. Well, thanks a lot, Chris. And to all of our listeners, be sure and subscribe if you have not and hit that, share the episode. Go to bankmarketingshow.com where you can, if you're listening today, you can catch the video or vice versa of the episode, catch lots of great other episodes around marketing and the entire banking industry and a lot of what's happening today and staying on the cutting edge of that. So, Chris, thanks again for today. Look forward to seeing you soon. Thanks to all of our listeners. Appreciate you being with us and have some great episodes coming in the future.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us. To go deeper or get access to some of the valuable nuggets from today's show, go to bankmarketingshow.com. There you'll find episodes, links to resources, and much more. Be sure to subscribe wherever you find your podcasts. And join us next time.